These are dark times, my friends. Not just because the light is at its shortest during this phase of the year as we approach the winter solstice, but because of the fear, the polarization, the violence and suffering we are dealing with throughout the world at this time. I don't know about you, but I can barely stomach turning on the news these days. So much of the progress we've made as a nation, as Unitarian Universalists, standing for equal rights, for justice, for love and dignity, seems to be imperiled. So many of the hard-fought battles to preserve our planet, to prevent fracking and oil pipelines and the degradation of our Mother Earth, seem to be in danger. And hearing of the devastating violence in Aleppo, with innocent civilians, women and children, being slaughtered, makes me feel like we're bystanders in another Holocaust. Hearing of the rise in hate crimes. Just the other day, a Muslim man was shot on the streets of Simi Valley just for being a Muslim. It has me despairing at the state of our country. And knowing that our children are increasingly being taunted and bullied at school for being Mexican or LGBTQ or different in some way breaks my heart. In fact, my heart breaks daily as I consider that what I've always valued as goodness, naming inclusivity, tolerance, compassion, and open-mindedness, now seems to be ridiculed by a large segment of our population as weak. What's happened to our values? Why are tweets and sound bites and fake news seemingly being given more airtime than calls for justice, compassion, and thoughtfulness? It's a dark time indeed. A time to lament. Because what kind of world are we living in? What kind of a messed up world filled with violence, hate, evil, and greed do we live in? What darkness is this? And in addition to the external issues that are currently occurring in our world, this time of year can also bring up pain and sadness in our personal lives. How to live through the holidays with the pain of divorce or separation, when the way you've celebrated as a family for years has to be reinvented, and you might be lonelier now. How to find any cause to celebrate when the pain of losing a loved one is so fresh. Their absence is felt so much more strongly when they're not with us around the holiday table. How to make it through tough financial times, which become more pronounced during the holidays, when you want to shower those you love with gifts, but you don't have the funds to do so. How to be with the pain of isolation, illness, or depression, when you're meant to feel the joys and magic of the season, but you just don't. You just don't. When we're supposed to be happy, loss, struggle, and despair can become so much more pronounced. Indeed, the darkness in our lives, our challenges, can be that much more present and painful at this time. And with the skies darker during the winter solstice days, that too can elicit dampened spirits and feelings of withdrawal and going within. Now, as a spiritual leader, I want to bring some message of hope, some comfort. But how do I do that genuinely when I too often feel despair at these times? I watched a devastating video from Channel 4 yesterday about what's happening in Aleppo. How do I bring an authentic message of hope amidst all of this bad news? How do we find the light in the depths of night? Now, these would seem to be important skills to use regularly throughout life, but the answers don't come easily. As I sat and ruminated on this sermon, I became curious about how to find an authentic, enduring source of hope. The Christmas story brings believers a sense of hope that it's a reminder of the birth of light and the potential of a better world to come. It's a story of joyous arrival and promise of a Savior coming to help a civilization. Certainly the joy and delight many children experience around Christmas is a source of happiness and hope. And Hanukkah also celebrates unforeseen miracles of light in a dark time. And the impending solstice reminds us that the light will come again. But if we don't celebrate those holidays or are struggling in our personal lives, it's much harder to find a source of hope and light right now. The pain in the world or in people suffering right now is not easy to fix. It's hard to find the message of redemption if you're struggling. So I decided just to sit with my grief. Sit with my grief for the world and mourn a while. To stay in the darkness, truly look into it, and not seek to escape it so quickly. As Carl Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Perhaps part of making it through the darkness is actually being with it, acknowledging it, allowing the feelings it brings up to just be, no matter how uncomfortable. Not sugarcoating it or trying to push it away. Perhaps part of making it through is accepting that these are dark times, but remembering that it cannot stay dark forever. Perhaps part of making it through is to sit in the darkness, wait, and watch as it gradually becomes easier to see in the dark, to find the outline of objects, to see shadows, and maybe even find some cracks of light in it. And if we are to sit with it, to allow ourselves to lament these dark times, what a great word, lament. A chance to feel or express sorrow and mourn the pain and suffering deeply. I understand why people have written lamentations and why some sing songs of lament. In fact, there's a whole book in the Bible called Lamentations. There's a wailing wall in Jerusalem for lamenting. There are mournful songs in many faith traditions because making sounds from the core of our body to lament the pain can be cathartic and healing. But when do we as UUs get such an opportunity to mourn? Do we need to wait for the next injustice or another disaster or act of terrorism to give ourselves permission to mourn? Or could we use this time together to collectively grieve what is so sad and painful in this world and in our lives right now. Sometimes such grief can only be expressed through sound, through wailing or crying out loud. So I invite you, if you feel so moved, to put your hand on your heart and join me in making a mourning, wailing, or groaning sound if you feel touched, as I share these words of lamentation. If you feel comfortable, close your eyes so you can truly get in touch with your own feelings and make whatever sounds feel like they want to emerge from you. I lament the lives lost too soon. I lament the innocent killed by violence. I lament bigotry and oppression. I lament that countless children go hungry tonight. I lament that millions are displaced from their homes. I lament war as the answer to anything. I lament how we pillage our earth. I lament people struggling in abusive relationships. I lament the disrespect of women and children. I lament the elderly being neglected and ignored. I lament that people are lonely and afraid. I lament that anyone lives in poverty. I lament cruelty and unkindness. I lament the loss of our inherent goodness. We were all born innocent. What happened to us? Where is the light amidst all this darkness? Take a moment now to breathe deeply with me. Take a deep breath in and join me in a big exhale or sigh, or make a sound if you wish. Ah. And then, just as I finish writing my lamentation, as if by some ordinary miracle, my husband walks into my room and asks me if I want a cup of tea. And those of you who've seen me go everywhere with my cup of tea know how much tea brings me comfort. And something in me transforms. Suddenly, I get it. Maybe that's how the light comes in. In the connections between us. In the small kindness, in the shared smile or generous deed, in the realization that we're not alone in all of this. We're not alone. And so when we feel really low, even when we live alone, step outside and make contact with someone, anyone. With the flower seller at the street corner, or the school crossing guard, or the stranger in the supermarket, or the homeless person sitting on the side of the street. Your presence, your very presence, might bring light into their lives. Your smile, your kind word, your generous deed, just as their presence might bring light into your life. And as I look around here, I see that we're really not alone. We're here together, going through all of life's difficulties together. And that's the beauty of community. We don't have to suffer alone. We don't have to face the new political reality, terrorism, divorce, illness, or the loss of a loved one alone. We can hold each other's hands. We can offer words of comfort or just be together. We can soothe each other's spirits. In fact, as I reflected on this month's theme of growing together in spirit, I also remember that focusing on what nourishes, what lights up my inner spirit, helps me through dark times. Tending to our inner flame is of utmost importance during these times. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, it is better to light a candle than curse the darkness. We can either focus on fear and cursing the dark, or choose to light a candle and kindle our spirits with courage and companionship. So where do we turn for spiritual sustenance? Well, I invite us to look for what nourishes you deeply within. What brings you peace and joy? And it may be different for each of us. Do you find your grounding through a meditation practice, through reading, or a prayer? Does journaling, writing, knitting, or painting renew your spirit? Does listening to or playing music help you? Do you love to sing or chant? Or does your inner being get refreshed through the physical practices of yoga, dancing, hiking, or running? Does being outside in nature renew you? Or is it attending our worship services regularly and discussing the theological questions in your small groups? Perhaps it's a combination of these practices. But in any case, I encourage us to focus on whatever strengthens and sustains our spirits and to practice those even more determinedly in the months to come, because we will need to. We need to be grounded and whole to move forward with courage and wisdom. One of my favorite poets, John O'Donoghue, who Lorella read earlier, says, "Our time is hungry in spirit. If we allow time for soul, we will come to sense its depth. If we fail to acquaint ourselves with soul, we will remain strangers in our own lives." So our light comes from within and from one another. In his book, It Was on Fire When I Lay Down on It, author and UU minister Robert Fulgham tells a true story about a man on the island of Crete. Crete, as many of you know, was ravaged during World War II, with horrific battles between Nazi paratroopers and peasants defending their lives and their tiny island. For decades, people lived in the grip of hate so that no one would forget this brutal slaughter of innocents. One man, Alexander Papaderos, founded a peace institute and decided if Germans and people from Crete could eventually understand and forgive each other, well, then any people could. Holding a small piece of mirror in his hand, he told Fulgham, "When I was a small child during the war, we were very poor and lived in a remote village. One day on the road, I found the broken pieces of a mirror. A German motorcycle had been wrecked in that place. I tried to find all the pieces and put them together, but it wasn't possible, so I only kept the largest piece. This one. I began to play with it as a toy and became fascinated by the fact that it could reflect light into dark places where the sun would never shine, in deep holes and crevices and dark closets. It became a game for me to get light into the most inaccessible places I could find. I kept the little mirror, and as I became a man, I grew to understand that this was not just a child's game, but a metaphor for what I might do with my life. I came to understand that I am not the light or the source of the light, but light, truth, understanding, and knowledge is there, and it will only shine in many dark places if I reflect it," he writes. "I am a fragment of a mirror. With what I have, I can reflect light into the dark places of this world, into the dark places of the hearts of men, and change some things in some people. Perhaps others may see or do likewise. This is what I am about. This is the meaning of my life." And then he took his small mirror, caught the bright rays of daylight streaming through the window, and reflected them onto Robert's face and hands. We are that mirror for one another, my friends. Our faces can reflect the light into one another's hearts. Our eyes can see the beauty and wholeness within each other and reflect that back. That's what we can do for each other. Shine the light into dark places. Shine the light when we can't find it in ourselves. And that's what we can do as a community for the world. In the midst of dark times, I feel so profoundly grateful to be part of a community such as this. And even though it sometimes seems we can do little to change external circumstances, we can nourish our inner spirit and be there with one another. We can hold each other's hands. We can share a cup of tea or coffee. We can talk and listen to one another. And we can offer each other a smile or a hug or laugh together right here at church. We can share our sadness, our tears, our fears, our alienation with one another and comfort each other. We can be of service to one another. We can brighten each other's spirits. We can shine a light into difficult times through listening, being together, and uplifting one another. And we can be grateful for one another. And beyond these walls, we can go out together with our torches raised in the night, bringing the light, because together, my friends, we stand on the side of love. We can turn this darkness into light by giving food to someone who is hungry. We can illuminate the night by wearing our safety pins to indicate that we are safe people to be around. We can share our glowing hearth with Syrian refugees, offering shelter from the slaughter. We can open our doors to immigrants, Muslims, LGBTQ folks, and people of color who may be scared in the coming days. And we can continue to stand visibly on the side of love because that's who we are. Can I get an amen? Amen. The light of love shines within our hearts. Humans have been lighting up this darkest time of year for millennia with fire, candlelight, oil lamps, and lights. So as we light our chalices, our menorahs, our Christmas lights, or candles this solstice, may we be grateful for the spark of light that brightens up our lives. May that light remind us that we can always rekindle the flame within and between us, even during our darkest times. So to strengthen us and give us courage as individuals and as a community, we are going to pass out little mirrors to remind each of us that we can shine the light into the dark places. We can offer one another the flame to reignite our hope. We can shine our mirrors of love, bringing light into the world's dark crevices. As we pass out the mirrors, I invite you to take one and then turn to your neighbor. And if they're comfortable with it, pin it onto their lapel and say, "May you be the light. May you be the light."